Hi, this is Ryo Koyama. Welcome to Choose Your Stack. We are at the MCP Dev Summit in New York City, and I'm very pleased to have Michael Grinich, CEO and founder of WorkOS. Thank you, Michael, for coming out.
Thanks for having me. It's happy to be here.
Now, I doubt no one doesn't know what WorkOS is, but why don't you give us a little snapshot of what WorkOS does?
Sure. So WorkOS helps startups, really any software company, with enterprise features in their app. So we like to say, we help you make your app enterprise ready. And a lot of this has to do with authentication. So how people sign into your product, the kind of user management layer, and then it extends from that into provisioning and deprovisioning users, role-based access control, permissions, logging, encryption, fraud detection. There's a ton of different products we have, but a lot of people start with WorkOS by adding us as their login box to go upmarket to enterprise, customers. And we do it with small companies getting started. But today we also power this for folks like OpenAI and Anthropic and Perplexity and Cursor and a bunch of others, the AI.
A bunch of small companies in that new field of AI.
Those small startups doing billions in revenue.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
If you've logged into those services, you've logged in through WorkOS.
Well, I feel like, probably as much as anybody, you've kind of had a front row seat in watching the AI era come upon us. And so what's your perspective on that? I mean, literally, let's go back to ancient times, like 18 months ago,
right,
versus where we are today. How have you seen that evolution happen? Because it's, one of the things you talked about just the other night was like how fast everything is going and how crazy fast it's going. So what's your digest about like literally the last 6 months?
So, 18 months feels like an eternity. If you go back a little bit further, maybe 2 years ago, I remember looking at ChatGPT and the very first versions of Claude and thinking about these as a new category of products, but I was considering them to be like AI chat. So back then the models weren't great, they didn't have reasoning built in, they weren't really being used at all for code authoring. It was really like a customer support experience. And from that, companies like Sierra also came out, a agentic customer chat experience for the enterprise. And so I saw that category and I was like, well, that's really a business software. We provide B2B infrastructure. I should go talk to those people and sell to them. So this is well before what's happened with the change in agentic coding and everything in the world. Since then, obviously, the models have gotten way more powerful. We've been able to build stuff way faster due to the AI coding systems. And I think the capabilities in AI it's kind of disrupted to the core of the entire application stack. And so you're seeing all these different areas of the just technology and kind of just commercial industry get flipped over because of the AI capabilities. And that's been an opportune moment for us as WorkOS to go serve all of them. So when I talk about our focus being startups, it's also the scale-ups going to these new categories. And because it's happening so fast, they need WorkOS sooner. And so our product, despite, WorkOS is like over 7 years old now. We're not a new company by any means. It pains me to say it. We are a pre-AI business, But what we built was like so perfectly positioned for these businesses. And then especially as the major AI companies started really accelerating, we've grown with them, and that's been a big tailwind for us.
No, I think you hit a lot of things. I mean, one of the things I think is interesting, if you look at like the last 12 years of software development, so much has been about making it easier to package for humans. But to your point, for AI, they don't really care. And so all of a sudden now I think we're going to hit a new level of efficiency. But kind of to the point you made, it's like, one of the things I say is if you're not in the open source space now, you're not training the models, and you're probably never going to get used. I mean, do you have an opinion about where that's going in terms of closed source versus open source?
I think it's really challenging to build pure closed source platforms. If you're building a database, a UI framework, an app builder, maybe your fundamental underlying infrastructure could be closed source, but the things that developers interface with need to be open source, because if it's not, the agents aren't going to get trained on it. It's not going to be really integrated with the pre-training data that's out there. So, like for example, WorkOS, one of our open source projects is Radix, which is a component system that ShadCN and other things are built on top of. That's been around for a long time. It's in the pre-training data. Claude and Codex are extremely good at writing code for that. Whereas, internal systems that companies might have for their own, design system, like an example that would be Retool. So Retool has their own proprietary UI system. It's not open source. It's not in the training data. The AI systems aren't great at writing it, so it's very hard to leverage that for that, that company. So I think open source is going to be more and more important rather than just distribution, but actually for product efficacy.
So what do you think about building products for agents now as opposed to building products, because you guys I think are doing one of the best jobs in terms of building for developers, but it seems like we're also hitting an era where it's not going to be developers, it's going to be agents that are doing the development, and maybe not traditional programmers doing that. So are you guys doing a lot towards maybe making it agent friendly?
So we started that about a year ago. We kind of started seeing that the way people were integrating our software was by using Cursor, these coding agents. So we started thinking about how do we take our documentation and make it more easy for agents to consume it. The LLMs.txt, semi-standard that got done. Our docs used to be much more kind of dynamic, like registered with JavaScript. We stripped a lot of that back so you could just consume it through Markdown and other files. But that was really for the early coding agents where the human was still in the loop doing stuff, right? A little bit later, we started building things around Claude skills. So giving more contextual kind of guidance and instruction to the agent for how to actually develop and integrate stuff. And we did that for migrations from different systems. We were finding ways to make the agent smarter with our API. So in addition to the documentation kind of instructions for it. Most recently, like in the last month, we shipped a new CLI. So we've had a CLI for WorkOS for a while, but this new CLI actually allows you to use AI to integrate our product, but it can do it without having a WorkOS account. So an agent running totally autonomously can grab the CLI and sign up for its own environment, configure it, test it, do everything, and then you as the human can claim it later. So we're actually switching from just human integrating augmented by agents, being helped by coding agents, to the opposite, where it's agent first and human second. And I think that's a big shift that's going to be occurring for all these products and platforms, as agents are the ones that sort of make the initial decision during the prototype phase. You want to smooth that out as much as possible. An agent, doesn't necessarily have an email address, so it can't register for something. An agent can't talk to a sales rep, so you can't have a contact sales button on your page if you want to get started with that. We just shipped pricing.md, which is a way for our pricing page to be accessible to an agent, so it can make kind of a pricing evaluation without needing to go, to our slider and dynamic page. So I think as much as you can provide all the data to an agent first, and then a human will analyze the derived value after that, that's going to be the way that things shift. And likely we're going to enter the realm of some companies exclusively selling to agents. I actually talked about this like a year and a half ago at our user conference. I said there'll be companies that only serve agents, and I remember a bunch of people in the audience like had these very puzzled looks. They're like, that's crazy, but it's kind of like companies that only provide an API. There are many of those today, right? And I think the natural progression is companies that just serve agents and they're able to sign up, register, use the service, and pay for it holistically within an agentic experience without having a person involved.
No, I think you explained it well, and I really do think you're absolutely ahead of the curve on that, because I think it's heading in that direction. I think the other thing too that I'm finding interesting, because like I said, I'm a networking guy, and so we're starting to now see, like, it's always felt really dumb to me that everything is still on the internet based on IP addresses and everything. But now we're starting to see people wanting to do authenticated, routing of traffic and everything like that. And so I can see where, like, for example, what WorkOS provides, authentication layer is going to start living downstream in different parts of the stack. Are you starting to see that? And do you think that will be an extension of like building for agents?
So there's around kind of identity and authentication for agentic systems. There's some interesting work that's been done about the WebBot auth, or kind of bot ID, where it's really designed more for web scrapers. So Cloudflare and Vercel and some others have done work around this, where if you have an agent that's visiting a site, it can identify itself effectively through a DNS record, sort of a cryptographic stamp. And then you can allow that scraper, that crawler, to actually access your content. I think it's primarily useful if you're like a media company, you're like the New York Times, you want to only allow a certain number of scrapers to do things. It doesn't really work if you have an agent that's like representing you to go do a task. It's just you embodied in this digital system that's going to go buy a flight or something like that. The identity layer doesn't actually work for that because it doesn't have permissions associated with it, any other resources. It's just an ID. And so this problem around how do we give identity and access management to agents is a totally unsolved thing. There are dozens of startups working on it from different dimensions, folks from the network layer. We're doing a lot of stuff at the application layer. There's folks from kind of the IT side, security and compliance side that are working on it. It's all over the place. So I think, it's going to be a really important thing. And even from the side around the tools that IT use to manage this, if you think about like Okta or Active Directory, these IT systems, that people already use to manage humans inside of teams, pretty soon there'll be 10x, 100x, 1000x more agents than people. And so those systems are going to need to get rebuilt as well. We're going to have these like digital coworkers we sort of collaborate with. And so I think we're just entering the very early innings of what it's going to mean for agentic software development, but also all of these downstream tools will need to get changed. You know, you're already seeing like GitHub struggle under the load of agentic systems working with it, right? Because there's so much code getting created. Imagine that, but for every other industry, everything's going to have to get rebuilt.
No, I think so. I mean, absolutely what you just said. I mean, right now people think about developers controlling agents, but pretty soon you're literally going to have thousands of agents that companies have that have nothing to do with a particular developer. It'll just be doing some sort of task. And like you said, you have to authenticate them. And how do you do that? And how do you manage that scale? Because it's going to be multiple orders of magnitude above what's out there today.
One of my favorite quotes, to err is human, but to screw up 10,000 times per second, you need a computer. It was Dijkstra that said it. And agents are like that. You know, like each person will be able to spawn these agents, and those agents will have sub-agents to be able to connect and, you know, converse with other agents and collaborate. It's going to be extremely powerful because at the end of the day, what agents really are is a labor multiplier. It's a thing that allows us to extend ourselves further, not do the menial tasks. It's like an extension of our body. You know, you imagine a hammer or like a car or like a backhoe or something like that. You know, it's an extension of our mind to be able to do things. Ivan Zhao from Notion, the Notion CEO, says the job will be, you know, to be a manager of infinite minds, which I think is a really beautiful encapsulation of that.
I think both of those are much more politically correct. What I say is every industrial revolution typically is built on slavery, and the indentured servants of this era are going to be the agents. So maybe that's not as politically correct as how you stated.
Maybe not so much. Yeah, let's hope there's not a civil rights revolution for agents.
Well, I mean, that's what
the clanker revolution. You know,
that's what every bit of sci-fi basically says. That is the Terminator story.
Well, we treat our agents very well at WorkOS. We hope that you know, our future robot overlords will take kindly to us.
All right, so to wrap it up, I mean, I'm sure you have at least one hot take, which is very different than what everybody else thinks. So what is the one thing that you think is different than everybody else here is thinking?
You know, so many people ask me about agent identity. We're a kind of an identity authentication management platform. You know, we help people with sign in and user identity and all of that. And so naturally, I think a lot of people assume that the way that we'll solve this for agents is identity. Like, let's stamp an ID on an agent, give it a name, give it an email address, whatever, and then it can go off and do stuff. The challenge, I think, is a governance. It's authorization of what the thing can do. And agents in particular are quite different in that when you spawn an agent to go do something, you don't know what access it needs. It's non-deterministic. The access it needs comes about as it's executing. And this is totally different than how we do permissions for systems today.
Completely ephemeral workloads.
It's completely different. Today, like with traditional systems, you can statically analyze a process and pretty much describe what permissions it needs and stamp that into a credential, call that good, and do a least privileges model. It's what we've been doing for decades with, you know, these large-scale systems. With agentic things, it's totally the opposite. It needs wide-scoped access to be able to discover things, but then you don't want to give it access to actually mutate things. And it's just a totally different permissioning model. And so I think a lot of people are coming at it from, you know, assuming that it's more similar rather than assuming it's more, you know, different. And as someone that likes building technology and platforms and kind of thinking about new things, this is like Candyland. I mean, it's totally open white space, and we're working on a ton of stuff and having a lot of fun building it.
Well, that's awesome. I look forward to sitting down again in September, or I guess, or when October, when we have the other one in San Jose, and see how wrong we were from where we were.
I know. In October, I mean, that's like a decade from now is what it feels like. So look forward to that.
Michael, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with us today.
Thanks so much. Great to see you.